Welcome to the Crisco and Company podcast. I'm your host, Lee Crisco, MD. Crisco and Company seeks to promote aspirational aging by equipping you for transformational health and well-being in your mature years. So hit like and subscribe and join our movement. As an MD of 35 years, I am ashamed of how my profession pays mere lip service to the importance of nutrition, when it is the basis of most chronic disease, the main driver of healthcare costs in the United States. We push pills, tests, and surgeries without addressing root causes. This oversight has created a burning desire in my soul to bypass the mainstream medical system and educate people on how to live full and healthy lives. Our guest today, Dr. Will Tuttle, is a visionary author, educator, and inspirational speaker. He is author of Your Inner Islands, The Keys to Intuitive Living, as well as the acclaimed Amazon #1 bestseller, The World Peace Diet, published in 17 languages. He's been featured in many documentary films, including the popular Cowspiracy, A Prayer for Compassion. Dr. Tuttle has presented widely throughout the world, in all 50 states and 50 countries over the past 40 years, sharing the vegan message in 4,000 lecture presentations. He's devoted to cultural healing and awakening, and as such is recipient of the Courage of Conscious Award and the Empty Cages Prize. He's a former Zen monk and Dharma master in the Zen tradition. Dr. Tuttle holds a PhD in philosophy from the University of California, Berkeley, and has taught college courses in creativity, humanities, religion, and philosophy. Welcome, Dr. Tuttle. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Crisco. I'm honored to be with you, and I really applaud your efforts to help shine the light of the importance of nutrition into the medical establishment. That's fantastic.
Yeah, well, I'm a diagnostic radiologist, so I spend most of my days looking at CAT scans and ultrasounds and MRIs and that type of thing. And it's not that uncommon that I'll look at a CAT scan. In fact, this will happen several times a day. I may see half a dozen diseases on a CAT scan that are all nutritionally related. Gallstones, fatty liver, diverticular disease, obesity, atherosclerosis, all in one patient. It would not be uncommon at all. And yet really the healthcare profession really doesn't really address that. I think the majority of patients that come through may see a number of different physicians and nurse practitioners and whatnot, and no one will say anything about what the root cause of the problems are. It's all about just adding to the shopping bag full of pills.
Right.
So, that's really started to bother me over the years, particularly after reading books like yours. So just yesterday, I finished rereading your book, The World Peace Diet, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I'd read it 3 or 4 years ago, fairly shortly after I'd become vegan, and it was a very powerful and affirming message that it delivered. After having a few years of veganism under my belt, it resonated even more with me. I actually enjoyed it even more the second time through. And I think the book is amazing in that you talk about things that many other authors talk about, the health impact of what we eat, the animal welfare issues and environmental issues. But you carry it several steps beyond by looking at it from a spiritual point of view as well. And you incorporate an amazing number of sources, a lot of scientific stuff, but also a lot of stuff from various religions around the world and various religious teachers throughout history. And incorporate, modern psychology and even, Jungian psychology. So it's amazing. You point out that so many of the problems that humanity faces these days have a common cause, whether we were talking about child abuse or chronic warfare or oppression of women, on and on and on. You say there's a common obvious cause that we're overlooking. What is that cause, and how are these things interconnected?
Right. Well, thank you. That's an excellent question, Dr. Crisco. I think the thing to understand is that there is this invisible lurking, I call it a spinning fury, really, at the core of our society that no one pays any attention to because it is such a large part of our private lives and our shared life, and that is animal agriculture. That's the word for it, animal agriculture, or herding animals. I coined the word herderism, but basically the living template of our society, the foundational practice and set of beliefs in our society is that we are superior to animals, and we need to eat them. We need to eat their flesh, and also the dairy products and eggs. The secretions that they give in order to get adequate nutrients. We need to do this. We need to get protein and calcium and so forth. And we won't get enough if we don't eat meat, dairy products, and eggs. Mm-hmm. And so this basic idea that is propagated from generation to generation and really requires all of us to be compelled from infancy to sit at the table and eat these foods. And they're given to us by people who love us, who want the best for us, want to make sure we're healthy and get plenty of protein and so forth. That is devastating. It's what I refer to as a Trojan horse, in the sense that I used to teach college courses in mythology, and the Trojan horse was conceived by the Greeks as a way to get through the defenses of the people of Troy and destroy them. And what I've realized in my research over the last, really, like you say, 40 years, is that animal agriculture, this practice of cutting down rainforests to grow soybeans, to feed to imprisoned cows and pigs and chickens and fishes, and then to eat those foods, and then all the drugs and all the diseases that causes, it's a massive, devastating, ongoing practice that is a taboo to discuss. We're not really allowed in our social conversations or our political and conversations to deeply question animal agriculture. And it's our defining blind spot, I would say. So I'm delighted to see that you are confronting this head on, because I think that's really the best way to do it, is to see it, to realize that this is something that is completely unnecessary. That's the good news. That's the thing I like to really start out with, is the good news that all of us as human beings have been given this wonderful gift of a physical body that does not require any of those foods. It doesn't require any animals to be imprisoned, to be impregnated on rape racks, to have their babies stolen, to be killed. All that suffering and violence, all the environmental devastation, all the pollution, all the poor workers who have to do this horrible work every day to kill animals, the whole thing is completely unnecessary, because all the nutrients that are in meat, dairy products, and eggs originally came from plants. Plants have this. We're here in southern Florida, and I'm like in a jungle, and the green leaves around us are engaged in photosynthesis, and this wonderful gift that we're converting sunlight and carbon dioxide in the air into carbohydrates and into fiber and into amino acids that create all the proteins, and into essential fatty acids that create all the lipids that we need to thrive. Everything. They bring up all the minerals from the soil. They create the vitamins. All the nutrients that we need to be healthy come from plants. If it's in the flesh of an animal or in dairy products or eggs, it didn't come from the animal. It came from the plants that they ate. So we don't have to kill and eat the middle animal. We can get it directly. Everything we can get directly from plants. So once we understand that, and we realize the suffering and misery that we're not only causing, but we're eating, and how these foods concentrate toxins in countless ways. We can go into that if people are interested. But really, it's this concentration of toxins that is causing so much disease in our society and making so many profits for the pharmaceutical medical complex, which in a sense, what it then does is takes that money, those massive profits, and invest it in narrative control, basically, in sort of owning the media and the medical education and the education of all of us and governmental agencies and so forth, so that we just stay on that path, stay on this path that maximizes profits for a relatively small percentage of the population, but causes enormous suffering to most of the people, to massive quantities of animals. I mean, we're killing not just a few million, we're talking about billions of animals every single day if we include marine animals, but millions of animals every day, even including land animals. So it's huge. The mind can never embrace the magnitude of animal agriculture, how how it reaches into every nook and cranny of our entire planet, the oceans and the rainforests and the prairies and every home. If you go into any refrigerator anywhere, you'll see the flesh and secretions of animals in almost any building you see. So, and the most intimate and powerful rituals in our society, in any society, are meals. So when we're sitting down and eating food, we're partaking of these foods. So this behavior of eating animal foods and then the underlying narratives of eating animal foods are pervasive in our society. It's the most powerful teaching that we get. It's really the most powerful teaching that any animal of any species gets. That the most important thing that parents teach their offspring, essentially, whatever the species is eat this, don't eat this. So that's why I think it's so difficult for us. You and I are talking here about these ideas, and we wonder, well, why don't people get this and just change? Because it's so obvious that eating animal foods is the driving force behind osteoporosis and liver disease and kidney disease and heart disease and breast, prostate, and colon cancer and autoimmune diseases and Alzheimer's. You can go on and on. And it's by far the biggest thing we're doing to despoil the planet. It causes food shortages that lead to hunger and war and conflict. I mean, by any scale, we would have long ago realized it's kind of like there's a burner on a stove in the kitchen, and we just insist on keep putting our hand on it like over and over again. We're just going to keep doing it, and we're not going to stop for some reason. And we just think it feels good, and we're suffering so much, and we just keep doing it. And so the question is, why is it? And I think it's because it's such a powerful, ritualized program in our society, and we learn to identify with this on a deep way. I'll just close with this idea, maybe for this first part. It's just this idea that we have these capacities that are so important and so precious. Like we have, I would say, three at least primary capacities. One is rationality and logic. We have the capacity to look, to analyze, to figure things out. Another capacity that we have is empathy. We don't like to suffer. We can see another being suffer and we empathize with them. That's a natural capacity. We try to reduce their suffering. We have actually the capacity for compassion. Mm-hmm. And these are powerful, beautiful, important capacities that we have. And we also have the capacity of intuition, which is spiritual wisdom. We can look deeply and see what's really going on. Mm-hmm. So we have these three capacities, but all three of them are in many ways eroded by animal agriculture, and I would say even destroyed almost completely when it comes to food, because of another force, which is, I use the word tribalism. We identify in the group that we're raised in the community, in the village, in the family. And we don't want to be different. We want to, if what they're eating, I want to eat. What my parents ate, I'm going to eat. We get together for gatherings, for meals, for holidays, whatever, all these different rituals, and we are very sensitive to being different. So what we're talking about basically is an evolution of consciousness that calls us to a higher level of actual empathy, awareness, I would say rationality and intuition, spiritual wisdom, of seeing the importance of the golden rule. Don't do to others what you wouldn't want to have done to yourself. And most of us nowadays have a companion animal or have had a dog or a cat of some kind, some kind of and so we are very keenly aware that there's a being behind those eyes. We would not want her to suffer or to be abused, and we wouldn't like it if someone came up and said to us, "Well, your dog looks pretty tasty. How about $6.50 a pound? Will that work?" I'll just kind of, put her in a closet and raise her in her own excrement, but you won't mind because you're getting some money. We would never allow that because we care about that being, and we know it's very logical that a cow and a pig and a chicken, these are animals that have the same capacities. They have personalities. When we go to sanctuaries where cows and pigs and chickens and other animals are, they have personalities. I've even studied with marine biologists who say the same thing about fish. And all beings have sentience. They can feel pain. They can suffer. They have an awareness. They're conscious. And so they have interests, and their interests are to them as important to them as my interests are to me. So we find ourselves in the position of being born into a society where from the time we're little kids, we're trained to be hideously unethical and abuse other living beings unnecessarily and pretend that it's fine. So the question is, how do we respond to that? Do we go along with it, or do we stand up and confront it and change our behavior and our attitudes and become an example for a world where peace and freedom and justice and health and kindness are actually possible, where we're not just merely hypocritically going along with violence and repressing feedback, numbing our own feelings and dumbing ourselves down, essentially. So it's really a calling to become more conscious and aware, and it goes right against the food program. And so it's not just sort of this hypothetical thing. Like people, when we go to church, they say, oh yeah, we practice forgiveness and we practice kindness. And I always want to say, okay, well, so what are you eating? Let's just see. Let's put it to the test. And I think that's it. That's the beautiful thing, is we can actually practice this. And it's not the end. I mean, going vegan doesn't mean like, okay, now I'm perfect. I don't have to do anything. I'm no longer the problem. Everybody else is the problem. But it is an essential primary first step for us as individuals and for our society. And then from there, we can continue on the great adventure of further awakening and healing and being part of the solution of the problems in our world, rather than being unconscious and being really just part of the problem. So that's the invisible thing. It's just animal agriculture. It's this hidden gulag of literally billions of animals who are suffering horribly. And it's behind a curtain that most of us never want to look, because we're paying for it. Every time we go to a restaurant or a store and we pay for meat, dairy products or eggs. And that's the hidden thing. And it's like Carl Jung said, you mentioned, that I mentioned, Carl Jung talked about the shadow archetype. And the irony about the shadow archetype is it's what we are, but it's what we say, no, we're not that. We're good, kind, loving people. We like to have a good steak. We like to have, cheese and burger and ice cream, but we're kind and loving. But there are over there, I can see them, some really very bad people. They're cruel and violent and heartless. We've better build a lot of weapons to fight against them. Mm-hmm. So the shadow archetype, the thing that's ironic about it is that the bigger the shadow is, the more invisible it is. You think it would be the other way around. But if a shadow, if it's something about us that's relatively minor, we can catch it and go, oh yeah, and then we can change in a positive way. But when it's really big, we can't see it. But what that does is two things, which are not in our best interest. Number one, it forces us to basically just shut down our awareness and just become unaware. We learn to just not see. We just don't see it. We just see a cow. In many ways, we don't actually see the being. We just see, oh, that's a burger that I haven't harvested yet. That kind of a thing. We don't see the actual being. So it reduces our awareness, number one. But then the other thing it does is it forces us to project what we're repressing out. And so we find in our society, people are so attracted to violence in many ways, to violent movies, music. We subconsciously create situations of war. And really what we end up doing is we create our own enslavement. As we enslave animals, we elect leaders who we find take away our freedoms. We become more and more subjugated the way we subjugate others. So the great wisdom traditions of the world, like Christianity, Buddhism, Taoism, Hinduism, Judaism, they all have these fundamental teachings of the golden rule: don't do to others what you wouldn't want to have done to yourself, and consequentiality, which is whatever you do, it will come back. Mm-hmm. As you sow, you will reap. So we sow in our behavior the seeds of disease and social breakdown for these animals, and we see it happening. So this is not just what you and I are talking about. These are not just shallow or sort of theoretical concepts and idea. We're not just philosophizing. We're talking about reality that's affecting us on a massive scale. Our happiness, our health, the future that our children are going to have. These are critical, and there's nothing more important than this at all that we can talk about. So I really appreciate your question. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I see this every day at work, where just once you see clearly the message that you're delivering, every day at work is sort of a day of madness, because I'll look at 80 imaging studies, and 55 or 6 of them have some kind of foodborne disease, and it will not even be addressed. And the crazy thing is, with the hospital, although it's actually in their mission statement of this health system that I work at to promote health, they don't really live by it. I remember one day I was at work within the last year or so, and I was a bit grumpy. I'd been on call. I was a bit worn thin, and someone said something to the fact, "Oh, this donut company has a donut truck outside the hospital, and the hospital's paying for free donuts for all the employees." And I was thinking, this is madness. According to Dr. Michael Greger, more people die of foodborne diseases nowadays than actually die from cigarettes. And I said, this is crazy. I mean, this is equivalent to giving the workers cigarettes in a hospital. And yet everybody just thinks it's just promoting goodwill, but it's almost like it's normalizing behavior amongst healthcare workers. Amongst healthcare workers, it's normal, so therefore it must be okay for everybody. And I just feel like I'm working in sort of an insane asylum sometimes at work. But one issue I've faced since I've embraced this lifestyle, and it's a big challenge, is in day-to-day life, you're eating, you may be in a situation where somebody offers you some meat or ice cream or whatever, and you just politely say no. And you often get some strange looks. And, from time to time, I will talk to people about their nutrition, because I'm 64 years old. I'm in very, very good physical health. I work out almost every day. And people notice that. And sometimes they'll say, "Oh, I see that you're eating, the super healthy looking lunch here today. Tell me a little bit about it." And it kind of opens the door to do a little bit of educating. But when you talk to people and you maybe turn down that ice cream bar or whatever, you get a range of responses. I've had responses range from inciting a brief 5 to 10 minute conversation, where the next time you talk to that person, they're level 10 vegan, and that's the way they've been for years now, And then I've had conversations where people get really angry. So do you have any pointers on how to broach this in a tactful, kind, gentle way that's not alienating and maybe helps persuade people?
That's a great question. It's always difficult to question the underlying paradigm of another person, because we identify with them. And so just without even saying anything, when people see you're eating different food, it's like you're from a different tribe. You're not from our tribe anymore. The tribalism gets triggered, and people get suspicious. It's almost hardwired, because in ancient times, I'm sure there was this basic idea that if you're not going to eat if you say to the tribe, "I'm not going to eat your food," then they were like, "Okay, then go off and die by yourself in the wilderness." It's like the worst possible thing you could ever do would be to not eat the tribe's food. Mm-hmm. And so what our goal is today is to try to, we don't want to leave the tribe, in a sense. We're trying to hope to get the tribe to evolve so that it can survive and not kill itself off, and not kill and the earth itself and everything else. So it's good to understand this. So that's why I wrote the World Peace Diet. It was focusing mainly on people who are pre-vegans, who are not vegans, to sort of lay the foundations of understanding to help them make the transition. But also, there's a lot of information in the World Peace Diet for vegans to not only understand more deeply, but to be more effective as advocates. And that's where the spiritual part comes in, because the problem really is that when we first begin to understand these things, we get really excited about the tremendous positive effect for ourselves and for our society. The dots start connecting, and we think, "Gosh, I got to spread this message. I got to stand on the table in the restaurant and shout to everybody, put away your meat, order the vegetarian dish," and we really feel like we're right and they're wrong. So that's the dualism that is the problem. And so the problem is we're still in a tiny minority. It's hard to know how many percent are actually vegan in the United States, say, but I don't think it's much more than 2, 3, 4, 5% at the most, depending on which survey. So we're still in a small minority. So the vast majority can easily just ignore us, laugh at us, get mad at us, whatever. We're not a threat in a sense, from the point of view of being a major movement. So what we have to realize is that as soon as I do anything that makes another person feel that I'm making them wrong, the natural tendency for us, because we do have an ego, is to defend, right? Defend and block. And so that basically tends to shut down productive, positive change. So the key idea that I've been working on all these years is, instead of trying to change other people, to change ourselves. Mm-hmm. To not even try to change other people, to not even have that be part of the thing, to just, we can offer perspectives that come from our own experience. Mm-hmm. So instead of thinking, okay, here's someone who's not vegan, they're asking me why I'm eating this way, to just basically have this inner orientation of, I'll just tell my story, and that's it. And that's the way that we plant seeds. So the idea is not to try to change other people, but to try to simply plant seeds and let them do what they want with it, not be attached to it. It's very hard to do, because maybe that's somebody we really love, we really hope that they will change, because we're living with them. And so this is very important, I think, to understand that if I come across as trying to change another person, that they're going to resist. For example, if someone came up to me and I could feel, and it doesn't even if we're saying nice things, it's like the underlying intention. We're very intuitive. We human beings are intuitive. Our body language and our tone of voice and 10,000 other things we pick up on. So it doesn't even matter what the words are. It's like if it's in me that I want to change that person, they're going to feel it. So if someone came up to me and I felt that, it would be a healthy thing to do, to put up my dukes and, defend myself, right? So the whole idea, I think, is to just relax, in a sense, as vegans around this thing, and just say, I realized that the only reason I was eating animal foods all those years was I was just following orders. I was just doing what I was told. I'm just so glad I realized that it wasn't my choice. It was just something I was doing because other people told me to. Now I'm not doing it anymore. It's fantastic. Mm-hmm. And then that's it. Don't say anything more. Sometimes less is more. Just share our own story. If you know the other person somewhat, and you know that they're concerned about the environment, or they're concerned about maybe animal welfare, or they're concerned about their health, you can use that. You can say, yeah, I realized that it was really, really devastating to the ecosystem, so I'm not doing it anymore. It's great. Or I realized it was really bad for my health. I'm not doing it anymore. I'm just so glad. Mm-hmm. And then if they have more questions, you can answer them. But the underlying idea is that the more we actually live our life as a manifestation authentically of what veganism is. What is veganism? It's love. It's love. It's nothing else. It's just being loving, being caring. So the more we actually are living our lives as a caring person, for not only for cows and pigs and chickens, but for the humans around us, people will feel that, and they'll be attracted, and they will want to be like us, in a sense. They'll be open to being changed. So they won't feel like we're this other tribal person that's trying to change them. We're not, a threat. We're actually embodying something that may be a goal that can become a goal for them. So the idea is that if we just tell our story and plant our seed, then that seed will go into that person's consciousness, and then the qualities that they have, their own kindness and awareness and logic and so forth, will water that seed. And as they're driving or whatever, they may start thinking, I'm going to try the vegan option at work today, or try something else, or they'll start thinking about it. And I think the more that we can change ourselves so that our message is congruent, because it's very easy. There's this whole archetype of the angry vegan. It's like, yeah, and people are like bugged with angry vegans, and so we because vegans do get angry because they think, well, I really was sharing some important information and they didn't hear it. So I'm going to yell it even louder. I'm going to shake them and I'm going to, yell at them till they change. There's an old story I remember. I just thought of it when I was a kid. I remember reading the story of a bet that was made between the wind and the sun. And there was the wind said, "I'm more powerful than you are," and the sun said, "Oh, you think so?" And then so the wind said, "Look, there's a man down there. We'll have a contest." So this man was walking along on the road, and the wind said, "Let's just see which one of us can take that cloak away from that man. Make him just take it away from him." And so the wind came down and howled around the man, and the harder the wind pulled on the cloak, the harder he hung on to it. And he just couldn't do it. So then the sun said, "All right, let me try." And the sun just started beaming all the heat. And the guy was like, "Oh man," and he just threw that cloak off. He was done with it, And so I think that's kind of it. Like when we can shine our love. And the other thing is, we always want fast results. And I remember this with my family. I really wanted them to go vegan. My sister, my brother, my mother, and some of the other cousins and nephews and nieces. But I did my best. I would say, let's watch this video together. I try to do it in a positive way and bring food. Like if there was all meat there, I would bring something and try to just plant my seeds. But it took years. I mean, it was like after 15 years, they went vegan, So a lot of people I hear and they go, their family won't go vegan and this won't happen. And I say, "Well, how long have you been at it?" And they say, "Well, I've been trying for 3 years, And I say, "Well, okay, it took me 15. So, so we have to also have the bigger picture. But 15 years, in a way, it goes by quickly. My mother finally went vegan. And she was like in her mid 70s by then. But she lived another 20 years, right? So it's good, and it was great. And Madeline's mother too. I mean, I think the idea is to just be in it for the long haul, and just do the best, because this is 10,000 years of momentum. It's not going to stop on a dime. It's so ingrained. Every institution in our society is organized around this and supports it. So we're talking about just doing everyday actions, but the most important point is to live it ourselves. So that's why I say veganism is a 2-step process. The first step is actually going vegan. That's great. But the second step is more difficult and more important, and that is to become, I guess the word, like I said, is loving in our behavior. And I think that really needs some inner work. Like I really recommend meditation and inner silence or prayer, whatever, to just take time every day to be quiet and listen internally and connect with the deeper truth that what I am is not just this object, this physical body that was born and will die. Because we're raised in a society that teaches us that we're taught to look at ourselves as just this body. We look at cows and pigs and chickens. We do this by the millions every day. We sell them by the pound. That's materialism. And so that materialism over 10,000 years has infiltrated our entire economic and political and educational and religious and governmental set of institutions. And so we see ourselves as an object. We have an economic system where we're encouraged to manipulate others as if they're just objects to give us what we want. And so that kind of deep structure of just using each other as objects, it's so taken for granted, and that's the problem. So the whole idea is to do the real hard inner work, to soften our gaze, to look at others with soft eyes of compassion and kindness. When people criticize us, get angry, to understand they're wounded. When someone's wounded, you don't kick them again, right? You just have some compassion for them. They've been hurt. They're striking out maybe, but don't take it personally. Mm-hmm. And then just share our own love with them as best we can, like what worked for us, mm-hmm. without trying to change them. And if we just keep doing that, planting our seed, eventually we'll see that positive changes are made at the foundational level. So people go vegan not because they feel like they're being pressured into it by us, but because they're choosing it. And then they're excited, and then they become more proactive in their choices and in the way that they live. So that's the idea. I think we can't get around that. It's really about the quality of our consciousness. That's the most important thing. And that's the one thing that we can change. I cannot change another person. As soon as I try to change them, that's an act of violence. But I can change this one. And the biggest change, I think, is awakening out of materialism, awakening out of this cultural narrative that reduces everything to matter and that takes away the spirit, takes away the sacred, takes away the most important truth of being, essentially. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you've triggered so many thoughts in my mind, and I think the advice you give is really good. Like in church, just fairly recently, I started going to church. Joyce and I have only been married since April, and she's a devout Christian, and I've started going to church. And it's interesting how I feel I've learned a lot, but one of the things they talk about is that all of us, even our enemies, ultimately come from the same source, and to see not just your friends, but your enemies as all from that same source. And so that if you're doing something against someone else, you're kind of doing it against yourself. But we're in a very interesting situation where we're moving to Iowa in a couple of months. I've had a job for the last 20 plus years where I've been working 5 to 7 days a week, evening, nights, weekends. It's just been a real meat grinder. Long story short, I got offered a job that basically pays the same, but is far more time off, which is going to give me time to pursue this website and educate people and so on. It just kind of fell into my lap. But where we're moving to, the small hospital I'm going to be working in is in Lamar's, Iowa, which is the self-proclaimed ice cream capital of the world. So we're going to have to be very tactful and keep in mind what you've been talking about and how we interact with people. Because I'm sure there's going to be all kinds of ice cream socials and that sort of thing. And just try to lead by example. But I know what you're saying works. I mean, there's one particular fellow at work that's had some health consequences, and he sees me eating a healthy lunch every day. And he started coming to me and say, well, what do you think about this? And he'll let me talk a little bit about it. He's in an open, receptive state. I know you're right. To just try to beat people on the head is not going to work. You talk about the world peace diet and how we sort of see, these pigs and cows and chickens as others. How does that impact us as far as other issues like racism and child abuse, the oppression of women, wars? How does that fit with us eating meat?
Great. Well, I just want to say, before I answer the question, that I'm glad to hear you're moving to Iowa. And Madeline and I, as we traveled around North America, living in an RV actually for 17 years, we gave lectures in every state, many lectures. And I remember at one point, quite a few years ago, maybe 15 years ago, there was a man from Iowa who kind of sponsored an Iowa, like veganized Iowa tour, kind of. I mean, just try to, and we spoke all over Iowa promoting veganism, and in some of the bigger cities like Des Moines and Ames and Cedar Rapids. I can't remember all the different, but I remember one little town that was really in the heart of animal agriculture land, and I gave a lecture in the library, and they had advertised it in the newspaper. And so all these people showed up. None of them were vegan. A lot of them were farmers. And I thought, oh boy, here we go. And the thing that I found that was so beautiful, though, was that I'm talking just like we're talking, just saying, the only reason anyone eats animal foods is because we're just following orders. That we were doing from the time we were little kids. And they all nodded and, agreed, and we know it's not in our best interest. And they were like, yeah, they knew it wasn't, I mean, there was no arguing. There was no, I mean, the basic things we're saying really are basic truths that people know. It's not, the whole idea is that we don't have to necessarily make other people upset or accuse them of wrongdoing or anything. We just share these sort of deeper fundamental truths of the golden rule and the basic sense of compassion and kindness that we have and how we yearn for healing. And that saying that Krishnamurti said, it's not a good idea to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. Everybody laughs, yeah. But in a way, it's true. We know that there's certain things in our society that are healthy. It's good to adopt those. There's other things in our society that aren't such a good idea. Why do we go along with that? So I do think that there's a veneer maybe of defensiveness perhaps about the ice cream socials and meat and dairy and how important it is, because there's an economic component. But the good news is, I think, in rural America and in general, there is a lot of basic wisdom there that we can, if we don't fight people, if we build on the common ground that we have, then we can make real progress. So I'm delighted to hear that you're going to Iowa, and then in terms of the what's connected, like you said in your question, the various types of social injustice that we see happening in the world and so forth. I think in general, it's good to just be aware that animal agriculture is a system that requires us to desensitize ourselves. So in the World Peace Diet, I talk about the fact that eating animal foods requires us to adopt a series of attitudes. So it doesn't just happen in a vacuum. So if we're sitting at the table, like I was when I was a little kid, and we're eating, all these different foods, so steaks and fish and chicken and different things and cheese and so forth, there's underlying narrative forces certain attitudes. So I'll just name maybe 3 or 4 of those, but it goes along with your question. Like number 1 is this attitude of don't make the connection, this attitude of disconnectedness. In other words, the underlying social value is when we're eating bacon, we don't ask, gosh, I wonder what the life of the pig was like. I wonder, was she slaughtered hanging upside down or right side up? We don't want to think about that. We want to enjoy the bacon. We don't want to think about the horror that this poor animal went through. So the whole thing, though, what that does is that really requires us to not look deeply, to not feel deeply, to not really care deeply when it comes to animals that are used for food. And since this is something that we're doing usually 2 or 3 times every day, and it's the most powerful social context, we have to just realize that we're born and raised in a society where all of us have our ability to make connections continually eroded from the time we're little kids. And my PhD at Berkeley focused a lot on intelligence. What is intelligence? Educating intelligence, not only rationality, but also intuitive intelligence. And intelligence basically is the capacity to make connections. So if we live in a society where everyone is forced and really compelled to participate in rituals where we don't make connections, where we learn to just stay shallow and not think about what happened to these animals, it's not only cognitive intelligence that's reduced, but also emotional intelligence and ethical intelligence and spiritual intelligence are all reduced. We have to kind of numb ourselves to what's really happening. So I think this is a wound that is inflicted on all of us. And it makes it easier for a few people to control the many. That's really what happens, because when people are dumbed down, and we don't really feel, we're not as sensitive, and we don't make connections as well, it's much easier for us to be manipulated and controlled, and with media narratives that are false, and we're not really connecting with each other. So that's one, and these things lead to things, I think, like racism and sexism and so forth, because we're taught to see others as other, right? Like, for example, the subtext of every meal, besides a mentality of disconnectedness, there's also this underlying mentality of might makes right. We're more powerful, they're less powerful. It's totally fine for the strong to dominate the weak. That's what we don't say that, but we're eating it, right? It's sort of this underlying truth that is just being propelled. And that's even more powerful than if we say it, because we're actually eating it as a ritual every single day. And a corollary of that is privilege and elitism, in the sense that the underlying subtext is that it's totally fine for those who are inherently superior to dominate and exploit those who are inherently inferior. So these narratives of superiority and inferiority are really part of that. It's kind of baked into our society with animal agriculture. We're superior to animals, we're superior to nature, we're only made in God's image, not the animals. This kind of idea gives us sort of the right to dominate and exploit others. And then the final one that you kind of brought in too is that animal agriculture is again, it's not just the humans dominating animals, but it's specifically dominating female animals, because it's really the female capacity that animals have to give birth to animals and to nurture those little, the offspring, that's most violently and brutally abused. That's really the core. See, animal agriculture really is three things, and all of them actually are bad. The one that we mainly think of is killing, right? We're killing them so we can eat them. But there's two other ones. One of them is imprisoning them. So we're taking away their freedom. There's nothing worse you can do to an animal than to take their freedom. I mean, we have a garden in Northern California at our house, and for a few months we had a temporary fence up to keep the deer out. It was just a plastic fence, nylon fence, and it worked perfectly. It was like 8 feet tall. The deer never came in. But once a deer got in by mistake, and she realized she was trapped in this, she destroyed the fence. She just crashed through it and broke it down. And it was such a clear indication that free living animals do not want to be imprisoned. But what we do is, what we've done, I mean, now after 10,000 years, is the babies are born into captivity, right? These cows and pigs and chickens and other animals, they're born right into slavery. They don't even know what freedom, because they would resist, they would try to run away. But, so that's something, quite honestly, when you think about it, only slaves would be so disconnected and not be outraged. I mean, to me, I'm kind of like outraged that we live in a society that has millions of animals born into slavery, and not just slavery and killed, born to be killed, but born to be raped. I mean, they're impregnated against their will. They're impregnated when we want to impregnate them on what the industry calls a rape rack. And as soon as they're impregnated and then their baby is born, we steal the baby, and we always kill the baby either right away, like in the case of calves, or a few weeks later in the case of chickens. And so it's a very violent, it's a very diabolical system. I mean, we can't underestimate how demonic this system really is that we're born into. But we're taught to think of it as just normal and natural and like good somehow, and it's horrific. If we were born as a cow on a dairy, I mean, the violence and horror, and not only that, but just the chronic pain and the chronic fear of having your milk taken every day and having your baby stolen away over and over again, and then just to be killed, have your throat slashed and killed. I mean, it's really unconscionable, because it's not necessary. I mean, what's in dairy products are casein and I mean, everything that we bovine growth hormone, things that just harm us. I mean, just make us sick. And so the whole idea is the sacred feminine dimension of consciousness, which I refer to as Sophia, which is in all of us from the time we're little kids, that is somehow with every meal reduced. And if we reduce Sophia in the general population, then we have a society that is less caring, really, for each other, for the environment, for the community, for children. So the whole idea, I think what you're talking about with your podcast of trying to help people be more aware of health and compassion, is the resurrection of Sophia, right? The resurrection of Sophia, which is the Greek word for wisdom. It's the wisdom within all of us to rise up and see that we are completely free of any need to imprison animals, and we can liberate them. And when that happens, I think a great weight goes off of our shoulders, and we can look out with our eyes into the world, and we can not be part of the violence anymore. And that's from I think a psychological point of view, an emotional point of view, it's very liberating to stop eating animal foods, to stop eating violence, and stop causing it. And then we start, I think, naturally to see ourselves and others as coming, like you said, from the same source. And when we see that, then the idea that people have a different race or a different gender or a different culture, ethnicity, background, even different species, we see we're all from the same source. Then a sense of love naturally begins to grow in us for them. And I think living our life for the short time we're on this earth, we're all just here for a few decades. Even if we eat a lot of sprouts, we're really healthy, maybe we get 10 or 11 decades, great, but it's still, I remember listening to the oldest living human being 117-year-old Japanese woman, and they asked her, "What's it like to be 117?" The only thing she could say is, "It just went by really fast." It goes by even when you're 117. It's like, what happened? So we're all gonna be leaving at some point. So the whole idea is to live our life so that we are living our best life, the life that we come here and we're not just contributing to a system of more violence and disease, but we're actually helping to make a better world for those around us. We're here to learn from each other and to help each other. And I think that's the underlying beauty, really, of understanding the great freedom that comes from going vegan, but also to see the bigger picture, spiritually and culturally and historically, and from the point of view of our society and our health, that it's all interconnected. The more we help anyone else or ourselves, the more we help everybody, and that everything we do really does matter. How we live our life, what we're eating, really makes a huge difference. It might not seem like it, but it makes a huge difference. And like Gandhi said, we can, each one of us, be the change that we want to see in the world. That's the only way it's going to ever happen.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, it's hard to top those last comments. I think that that probably is an excellent positive note for us to end today. Again, thank you so much for joining us. We feel very honored and privileged, and appreciate your help on promoting this message. Thanks again, and maybe we can do it some other time.
Wonderful. Yeah, I'm be delighted to. It's really been an honor, and it's so good to see this new adventure that you're starting, the two of you together, and let's do it again. There's a lot more we can talk about. So thank you very much.
It was great. And just to summarize, the book is The World Peace Diet. And how would people be best to learn more?
Yeah, sure. You can come and visit our website. That's probably the best thing, worldpeacediet.com, or my name, willtuttle.com. Either one of those will get you there. And we have quite a lot of resources. There's the book, The World Peace Diet. I have a new book coming probably in May called Food and Freedom. And then there's other books. There's a book on veganism and Buddhism, another one on social justice issues, one on intuition, some music. I'm a musician, CDs. My wife's an artist. She has lots of cooking videos, vegan cooking videos, gardening videos. We like to promote vegan gardening and veganic gardening. Our lecture schedule we're doing about, probably 60 lectures across the United States. And so if you know anyone in the area in the southern United States between Florida and California and South Carolina and so forth, we're in Florida right at the moment, but you can see where we are. We have, articles I'm writing and so forth. So we'd be happy to answer people's questions and stay in touch.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks very much.